Well, hello there, and welcome to Coast AM. My name is Richard Syrett, and I'm sitting in for George Noory, the hardest working man in show business. Now, I don't have cosmic security clearance, so I can't say for sure where George is, but I'm speculating here that he's off somewhere making more episodes of Beyond Belief, his internet television program, and that's why I've been pressed into duty. All I know is I usually receive a series of clues encrypted inside the New York Times crossword puzzle telling me to be here, or sometimes I receive a late-night phone call. It usually goes something like this. The phone rings, and then it's, Richard Syrett, why don't you pass the time with a game of solitaire? And then again, mysteriously, I just find myself here in front of this microphone. So here we are, you and me, live from Los Angeles, via Coast to Coast's Toronto affiliate, AM 640 Talk Radio, and I can't think of a better way of spending my Friday night, Saturday morning than with you all. And of course, Friday nights mean that in the second half of the program, it's open lines. It's an institution, a national treasure, and it's all about you. It's your time to shine. It's really, when you think about it, it's democracy at its best. You call in, you get on the air, you exercise your First Amendment, and you steer this ship wherever you want to take it. And I'm here. I'm all ears. First, however, we will travel to the red planet, Mars. About a week and a half ago, a plasma physicist, what is that? We'll find out. Anyway, he presented a controversial theory at the 46th Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in Houston, Texas. Dr. John Brandenburg says the evidence is incontrovertible. An ancient Mars civilization was wiped out by a nuclear bomb. Now, at the conference, he didn't go into a lot of detail about the alien races per se. He pointed to a number of artifacts on the surface that he says are remnants of an intelligent society. But here's where it gets interesting. He warned we should all be fearful of an attack from this supposedly hostile alien race that wiped out these same Martians. He went on to explain that a thin layer of radioactive substances, including uranium, thorium, and radioactive potassium on the surface of the red planet provide evidence for his theory. And nuclear isotopes in the atmosphere apparently resemble hydrogen bomb tests, which he says occurred in two places on Mars, Cydonia Mensa and Galaxius Chaos. He says we have now found evidence of the nuclear melt glass trinitite formed on Earth at the site of nuclear weapon airbursts. They were found at both sides of the hypothesized explosions, and all this was presented at the aforementioned conference. Now, as I was reading about this in the online edition of the London Daily Mail, I thought, wait a minute, I've heard much of this before. Ancient advanced civilizations on Mars, ancient cataclysmic events. Any casual listener to Coast will be familiar with my guest in hours 1 and 2 tonight. He's been talking about this for years, and on this very program, Richard C. Hoagland is standing by to talk about the Sidonians and Utopians and nuclear war on the red planet. He'll also talk about something much closer to home, our moon, and what the Chinese have discovered there. We will go down the Jade Rabbit Hole here on Coast to Coast AM. I'm Richard Syrett. Come on in, set yourself down, and stay a while. Welcome back to Coast, Richard Syrett, sitting in for George Noory. Richard C. Hoagland is a former Space Science Museum curator, a former NASA consultant, and during the historic Apollo missions to the moon, was science advisor to Walter Cronkite and CBS News for over 20 years. Richard has been leading an outside scientific team in a critically acclaimed independent analysis of possible intelligently designed artifacts on Mars. Richard and his team's investigations have been quietly extended to include over 30 years of previously hidden data from NASA, Soviet, and Pentagon missions to the moon. Of course, he is the author of The Monuments of Mars, A City on the Edge of Forever, and Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA. Richard C. Hoagland, welcome to Coast AM. How are you, sir?
Thanks for your nice intro, and nice to be here, Richard.
Well, I'm in awe. I feel like I've sort of grown up with you listening to Coast over the years.
We can't have any awe tonight. No awe tonight. You're Richard,
all right.
I'm Richard.
Just a couple of Richards.
Huge story to try to tell in 2 hours.
Well, we will do our best. First of all, explain. Now, have you attended one of these conferences that I spoke of earlier? This is the 46th. The 46th Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in Houston. Tell us a little bit about what this conference is all about.
Well, back during the old, Groven days of Apollo, after Apollo 11, the scientific community that had participated in the missions and had got, several hundred pounds of moon rocks, obviously wanted to analyze them and share them with the world. So they set up this, turned out to be annual Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in Houston, next to the NASA Houston Manned Space Flight Center. And the first one was back in, I think, 1970, a few months after Apollo 11 in July of 69. So evermore, every year in March, there is an LPL, Lunar and Planetary Science Conference, which is often referred to as the Rock Conference because it dealt primarily initially with moon rocks and then expanded over the years to include papers on outer planets, unmanned robots photographing the rings of Saturn, the distant echoes of the Voyager 2 leaving the heliopause and entering interstellar space. It's become a kind of an interesting catch-all for all kinds of cutting-edge stuff. But what was really intriguing is to see Brandenburg show up and give a paper which actually is an echo, fleshed out a bit, of conversations that he and I had back 30-some years ago when I first invited him to join the Mars investigation, the independent Mars investigation at SRI International, which is a big think tank there south of San Francisco. And this was 1983. So John and I initially had conversations because I reached out and specifically picked him out because he was a plasma physicist familiar with nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons technology, because in our analysis, our early primitive analysis of the Viking images of Cydonia, the place on Mars about 45 degrees north, which is reflective of some kind of ancient habitation. It's got a huge face, pyramids, geometry, layout, and it has anomalous isotopes as measured by Viking and subsequent missions. And John and I in 83 had this conversation when I was going to invite him in because I wanted him to be our nuclear expert on the team, because to me, some of the craters in the Cydonia region around the face and the pyramids did not look like natural meteoritic impact craters or asteroid impacts. They looked like the nuclear explosion tests in Nevada, in Sudan, and the other named tests that were done in the southwestern United States, and they have a different size to depth ratio, and they really look different if you have any kind of an eye for this. And that's what John and I began our conversation, which ultimately led him into the Independent Mars Investigation as a contributor, and ultimately to write a couple, 3 books about ancient civilizations on Mars, and now to come out with the idea that the civilizations that we've been looking at may have been destroyed by a global Martian nuclear war.
Well, let's talk about the evidence and these nuclear isotopes.
So none of that impresses you?
Well, it does. It does. I want to delve into that because I want to find out, why. Is there no other natural explanation for that? I want you to explain why this is so significant.
Okay. Well, in science, you're never dealing with absolutes. You're usually dealing with probabilities. Something is likely to happen. It might happen. It's incredibly improbable that it will happen. I mean, I heard a statistic yesterday dealing with this awful tragedy in France of the crash of the German Wings airliner. And some expert, and it was repeated several different places, so I know it's got to be good data, the odds of you, if you flew on an airplane, a jet airplane, every single day of your life, the odds of you getting into a fatal accident in an airplane, you'd have to do that day after day, year after year, century after century for 63,000 years to have the chance of one that you would be dying in an airplane. That's how safe air travel is. Well, that's a boggling statistic.
It is,
that
indeed.
That statistic is 1 in 25 million. Well, the odds of life on Mars, of an ancient civilization on Mars, and on the moon, to leap to the second part of our conversation, and on comets, or at comets, involving asteroids, little moons of the giant outer planets, even the rings of Saturn, is close to exceeding that 25 million to 1 odds against having an accident on an airplane that will kill you by a factor of 1 trillion times.
Wow.
In other words, we have statistical data that is so robust that under any normal circumstance, Richard, the jury, which means the American people and the experts in the academic community, would have looked at all this data coming out of 50 years of going into space and sending back images, and that they would have said, oh my God, we live in a formerly inhabited solar system. Instead, for 50 years, they've been playing hide and seek with the real good stuff, the data. And they've given us the pablum. Oh, some spectacular pictures and interesting, if somewhat boring to most folks, science, but the really good stuff, which is the stunning verification that the human race on this planet is not alone and is surrounded in orbit by millions of artifacts of every conceivable size and description on all of the worlds we have visited and sent back in all the images by all the distant international space programs. And that all of this is supposed to be kept from not only the American people, but everybody. I mean, talk about a crime against humanity. Well, in that very, very depressing and sad 50-year history, there is now a difference. There's a change. There's something going on, and it's going to lead, I believe, to the D word, disclosure. Officials and government finally sitting in front of microphones and saying, well, look at this, folks. Look what we found out there. And the reason I think this is because I have been watching carefully over the last several years a series of drip, drip, drip announcements in a variety of venues, from White House statements to NASA administrator testifying before Congress to images themselves, culminating in a flood of stunning images from NASA, from the European Space Agency, from ESA, from the Chinese Space Agency, which landed, your Jade rabbit hole on the moon a few months ago.
Yes, we have to get into that.
It's all coming together to where they're getting ready for the big disclosure that, folks, we ain't alone, and we've got stuff to look at, and we're going to need a lot more money to do this as a diversion from the war mania, the war insanity which has overtaken planet Earth. Back during the Kennedy administration, there was a very controversial publication, and the details can be found just by Googling on the Internet. It was something called a document which was published first as a story in Newsweek magazine called Report from Iron Mountain. Just Google Report from Iron Mountain. There has been incredible controversy ever since, whether this was a real document or a spoof document, but it mentions all kinds of real think tank players like Brookings and Heritage and the Hudson Foundation, whatever. And what the document purported to explore with a bunch of scholars and military people and economists and eggheads, as they were called back then, from a variety of universities and industry and even government, where they were looking at alternatives to the human race killing itself in the next 100 years, either through environmental disaster or through a thermonuclear global World War III that basically winds up incinerating civilization and we all start over. And the document that came out, this report from Iron Mountain, mentioned an extraordinarily accelerated and expanded and funded civilian space program exploring and colonizing and utilizing the resources of the solar system as something big enough to be a counterweight to the overwhelming human depressive cycle of war after war after war after war on a planet with technology that was shrinking. So some idiot in a basement somewhere in the world can literally create a weapon that can destroy a sizable chunk of humanity because of the trigger effects of everybody overreacting, and you wind up with World War III with nuclear weapons on all sides.
But it seems then that it's history repeating itself if we're talking about...
One last footnote here.
All right.
My suspicions, based on 30 years now of doing this, remember, I used to be Cronkite's science advisor. I was a NASA science advisor. I've got plaques flying out amid the stars that Eric Burgess and I, gave the idea to Carl Sagan decades ago. So when I look at this and I come to the decision that the report from Iron Mountain was not fiction, but in fact a trial balloon by the Kennedy administration, specifically John Kennedy himself and his hand-picked NASA administrator, James Webb, and their crafting of what they referred to as a vision for a 21st century space America. Because they realized at the beginning of the space age, the dawn of the first age of space, that the only thing that ultimately would save the human race is to get off this one little ball of mud and expand out so we have more resources. We're not chopping up the furniture in the living room to support 7 billion people, and we're not going psychologically stir-crazy because we're confined to one little dust bowl where resources are running out and more people will have to have mouths to feed and look to their neighbors with greedy, envious eyes because it's survival or die. So this vision, this report from Iron Mountain, is what I wanted to kind of talk about tonight because I'm going to give in the next hour and a half a bunch of data that supports overwhelmingly now that we are being prepared in the way that will strike love and wonder into the heart of any Star Trek fan. We are being prepared to confront the up till now hidden reality from NASA and all these other space programs that, in fact, there's enormous stuff out there to go and explore, bring home, back engineer, and create the kind of human civilization on this planet that we all finally deserve. And I don't think we're very many months or years away from such an extraordinary change, and that's what I want to talk about tonight.
All right. Well, obviously there is this incredible battle going on behind scenes between those who want disclosure and those who don't feel we're quite ready yet. But you seem to be suggesting, Richard, that the pro-disclosure forces are winning. I'd like to know, who are these disclosure forces behind the scenes?
Well, hang on. Before we get to the speculation, which is the fun part, let's do some data. The reason that I'm thinking that this is a robust model, this is a political model that's finally, Steve Bassett, are you listening, is going to come to pass, is because the three major space agencies have been putting extraordinary, stunning, awesome data on the public record and yet not commenting. Now, after decades of hiding and lying and attacking anybody like me that claim that, they may be not telling us the total truth, why would NASA, why would ESA, why would the Chinese government quietly be putting real images of stunning ancient artifacts on the moon, on Mars, on Ceres, the new asteroid that we've just walked up on, the largest asteroid in the asteroid belt that has an extraordinary history, if not a future, that we're going to see in the next few weeks. And this comet that the Europeans have been exploring in great depth, 67P, and two Russian names that I will not try to pronounce tonight. all of that is coming to a head at the same time that politically we're seeing more and more avant-garde discussions in mainstream media, like John Brandenburg's appearance at this mainstream conference and being allowed to present the absolutely heretical idea that there was an ancient nuclear war on Mars and there were Martians.
All right, Richard, you stay where you are. We will come back on the other side and delve into this incredible story. A nuclear war on Mars laid waste to an advanced civilization. Do we see history perhaps repeating itself? If we're not careful, perhaps. More of my conversation with Richard C. Hoagland right here on Coast to Coast. Don't you dare go away. Welcome back. Sitting in for the indefatigable one, George Noory. Richard C. Hoagland standing by. More of our conversation upcoming. Dr. John Brandenburg, a plasma physicist, presented his compelling controversial theory recently at the 46th Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in Houston, Texas. He says nuclear isotopes in the atmosphere around the red planet apparently resemble hydrogen bomb tests, which he says occurred in two places on Mars, Cydonia Mensa and Galaxis Chaos. Now, back in 2011, he first postulated that the red color on Mars could have been due to a naturally occurring thermonuclear explosion. But now he thinks it was caused by an intelligent alien race, an ancient nuclear cataclysm on the red planet. We'll find out what that all means for our future when Coast to Coast continues right here. My name is Richard Syrett. Stay with us. And we are back with Richard C. Hoagland. EnterpriseMission.com, of course, is the website. Richard, if we could just go back to this Brookings report. Now, this goes back to what, about 1960, which...
Well, it was commissioned in the late 50s. It was delivered to the 87th Congress in 59. And Kennedy, when he came in, curiously made it public in 1960 and 61.
Right. And there was just this one little short section that's titled The Implications of a Discovery of Extraterrestrial Life. Tell me about that section.
Well, when we found this, I mean, this had been a rumor for years and years and years. And make a long story short, one of my friends asked me to kind of track down to see if this thing was real. And I turned to a friend of mine named Clinton, of all things, in Little Rock, Arkansas, no relation to Bill or Hillary. And my friend found a copy of the Brookings report, which has a much longer and more formal name, in the Federal Archive in Little Rock, Arkansas. It turns out there's a copy in quite a few federal archives scattered around the country. Now, the reason this report was so incendiary is because it basically had this section, as you just noted, discussing the implications if NASA were to find ET life. You know, little aliens, little green men. But what they said in the document was so provocative because it said that such a discovery would not likely occur for 20 years. How could they know that in 1959? And that it would first come about because of ruins of an ancient civilization discovered either on the Moon, Mars, or Venus. And how could they know that?
Indeed.
So what they then recommended, which is a really important, crucial part of the document, is A, there should be deep discussion in the government about the role of scientists in any of this. And that, of course, made every hair on the back of my neck stand up because the role of scientists, when they find out something, is to, damn it, publish. This is veiled government speak for how can we shut the damn scientists up so we can do with this what we want.
And how did this... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, there's one more section. Then there's a recommendation set of pages that come after that. And by the way, the footnotes are really interesting, drawing on earlier work and discussions with Margaret Mead, who I worked with at the Hayden Planetarium in New York City many years ago, and her work in the South Seas and extrapolations from primitive cultures meeting advanced cultures in Earth history, which has not worked out too well for the so-called primitive culture, eh? Anyway, the paranoia in Brookings basically said, paraphrasing Jack Nicholson in that wonderful movie, if we find it, we can't tell them because they can't take it.
Right,
and that's
right.
the policy they've been operating under for the last half century. And every other space program, because, of course, the dire warning at the end of Brookings was, if you release this information that we're not alone, either in the form of, little guys in ships or zipping around, i.e. the UFO thing, or which you would think would be inherently much more safer, that's terrible, much safer, ruins, ancient archaeology found on the moon or Mars or wherever, you might think that would be safe. Oh, no, Margaret Mead warned. What if we find in their libraries information that would totally destroy every science that humanity thinks they know? They basically warned, Richard, in this document, that it could destroy human civilization if human beings were to receive certitude knowledge, scientific evidence that the human race has predecessors, companions, other stars out there with other civilizations, and some of them in the past or even now might be coming here or could have come here.
So this Brookings report, this is the smoking document. This is the smoking gun, where this is ground zero for the
last 30 years.
Right.
What is interesting is you put these two documents together. You put the Brookings document, which basically is paranoid as hell. It reminds you of some of the McCarthy hearings. And then you put that together with the report from Iron Mountain, which says the only salvation of the human race is ultimately to go to space big time and to put human beings on other worlds and to bring resources back and stop defiling the nest and destroying civilization through either resource depletion or nuclear war because of resource depletion. You put these two things together and you've got what I think we're on the cusp of, which is the second age of space. Which means we're on the threshold, if I'm right, and that's what we're going to spend the next, hour and 15 minutes talking about, that we could see stunning changes in all of this controlling, you can't see it because you can't handle it, nonsense that's gone on for the last half century. And we're going to see a physical opening up of the solar system to where ordinary Americans, ordinary Brits, ordinary French guys, Italians, Zambesians, can buy a ticket and go to Mars in the foreseeable future, not because of government space programs, which are up until recently playing their role of hiding everything, but the so-called private enterprise programs of people like Elon Musk and SpaceX and Jeff Bezos and Sir Richard Branson. There is such a stunning revolution being born right before our eyes, and we're going to spend the rest of the show talking about the specifics so everybody will know what to look for and how to follow the bouncing ball.
Is that what's happening? Is it that these private initiatives, you mentioned Elon Musk and others, they are forcing the hands of those that have been keeping the lid on disclosure for the last 60-plus years, that they now feel that they are compelled to do a controlled release, a controlled disclosure?
I've been wrestling with this for years now, and George and I have discussed this, excuse me for a minute, discussed this many times on the show. Why are we suddenly getting a Niagara Falls equivalent of real stunning data? I mean, if Lex gets the images I sent him earlier tonight posted, you're going to see some astonishing close-ups with screws and springs and baffles and plates and metal sheets and all this of artifacts on Mars taken by the Curiosity rover that not only we've never really seen, but they're now presenting them in a form, a non-JPEG form, so you can actually see the details. For years we wondered why these cameras that cost so many billions of dollars are crappier than the worst, smartphone in your camera in your phone you can get. It's because NASA's been tweaking the images to not reveal interesting stuff. Well, they've stopped doing a lot of that. And the Europeans have done the same thing. Amazing images coming out of their comet mission. And the Chinese, we'll get to the moon and the Chinese, I guess in the next hour or so. The point is, why are they all doing this? This afternoon, I had this lightning bolt, which was, oh my, it's because of people like Elon Musk. If you really have a relatively free society, and you can't shoot down all the private spaceships that are going to be going out there in the next, 10 years or so, what do you do? If someday ordinary folks are going to be taking pictures of these things and sending, Twitter feeds that will go viral instantly because it's, look, Mom, my God, they were right. There's stuff here. So if you're preparing for that kind of future where you can't keep your fingers in the dike much longer, your PR backup plan, your political plan B has got to be to put enough stuff in the archive that when the historians and people like me start pointing and saying, but you guys claimed all this stuff was not there, NASA can say quietly, just look under date so-and-so, Sol 739, whatever, and you'll see all kinds. If you were too damn dumb not to notice it, we can't help that. We published it just as we said as the Curiosity Mars mission began that we would.
On the one hand, deny, but on the other hand, it's, well, here you go. Here's the information for those with eyes to see and ears to hear.
Well, I call it creeping disclosure because we live in a society, Richard, and this is really, really, really sad. Unless Barack Obama sits behind the Oval Office desk, and maybe that's not a good example because who the hell would believe Obama anyway these days?
Indeed.
If some authority figure, now think of who would be, let's say the Pope. If Pope Francis were to make a global address with photographs and say, this is what's out there, everybody who's been in the know on this, including the Coast audience, would say, oh my God, NASA's been hiding all this stuff all these years. They'd rush to the archive and they're going to find all of these images of ancient, amazing technology that NASA's quietly been putting into its archives over the last 3 years.
But didn't the Vatican's chief astronomer already do that? Didn't the Vatican's chief astronomer already sort of do that?
They've been hinting, they've been edging up on it. It started out with, we will baptize any aliens that want it if they just ask. Well, I was, until I reformed, a Roman Catholic. I happen to know that is directly 180 degrees away from Catholic doctrine and papal edicts and papal bulls. In order to be baptized, what are you being baptized for? To remove original sin, right?
Correct.
Okay. If you have an alien or an ET, do they have, if they don't have the human experience, if they're not human, do they have original sin? So you have to be a member of the human family to come to Earth as an ET and have original sin. So what the Pope is really saying subtly was the first aliens that are going to show up are going to be members of the family. You see how this is escalating, accelerating, kind of like the whole accelerating, universe, Big Bang thing?
Right. I mean, we're all related. If, in fact, this cataclysmic event happened on the Red Planet, we are sort of the surviving remnants of that. Which
is precisely what I looked into the camera on Fox about a decade ago and said, we are the Martians. And so a nuclear war on Mars, or however it came about, and if you want to, in the next hour we can get into some of those interesting differences that I have between what John is saying now and where our research has gone, because they have diverged. And while he's thinking conventional nuclear weapons, I'm thinking of things that, in fact, Richard, may have been used in a very blatant demonstration during 9/11 here on Earth. And they're not nuclear weapons at all. They're so far beyond nuclear weapons as nuclear weapons are beyond, Nobel's dynamite.
Are we talking directed energy weapons?
Exactly, except it isn't EM. It's the underlying field of space, the so-called torsion field, that if you manipulate it right, you can get matter to simply fall apart. Or as Dr. Judy Wood said, to dustify.
Yes.
The buildings floated down like 1 trillion little particles of concrete dust because that's what the weapon did to them. The planes were only a diversion to give the mainstream an excuse for what was really a demo for the in-crowd that you can't touch us. Look what we can do, and they've been running scared for the last 15 years. When
you look at our solar system, Richard, and out in other solar systems, we're discovering these super Earths that are many more times, the mass of our planet here. Do you see other evidence of a major, cosmic war that happened in our own backyard?
Yeah. There's so many lines of it. In fact, that's why I'm writing 2 new books. One is ready, one is out, one was released by North Atlantic Books on Monday. Was it Monday? What day was the 24th? Wednesday?
That was Wednesday, yes.
Wednesday, yeah. Anyway, the release date is the 24th. The book I happen to have a copy sitting right here. Isn't that amazing? Pluto, New Horizons for a Lost Horizon. That's Pluto, New Horizons for a Lost Horizon. Subtitle is Astronomy, Astrology, and Mythology. It's edited by Richard Grossinger. It's an anthology of a bunch of us folks who have been looking at Pluto both in an historical context, in a mythological context, in an astrological, which is a psychological context, in a spiritual context, and of course, from our work, in a potential breakthrough on the whole ETs were out there and remodeling the solar system context, which I describe in exquisite detail with hundreds of references in about 15% of the book, which is available on North Atlantic's website tonight. You can also go to Amazon.com. It's called Pluto, New Horizons for a Lost Horizon.
All right, there you go. But what are some of the other sort of red flags that jump out at you that, here in our own little backyard of the cosmos, there was a major nuclear conflagration or other types of, advanced weaponry, happening. I mean, we look out in the solar system or beyond our solar system. We are really an anomaly in terms of, the mass of our planet compared to other Earth-type planets.
You really have been following the story. I have to commend you. You have a very accurate description of the details, and therein lies where the story has to go. The mainstream scientific community, and this is absolutely unprecedented. In fact, I lead off my Pluto chapter in the book with this. In the last 2 years, the mainstream scientific community, astronomers, physicists, chemists, the folks that get together at these conferences, that share papers, that share research when you need a geologist to look at the signatures of an exoplanet discovered by Hubble or, the Keck telescopes or whatever, they have reached a consensus, and this is mind-boggling, and it has not made, Brian Williams didn't claim to have found this. They have found that the solar system is well-nigh unique, one of a kind. Absolutely none can compare. It's one of. And this is such scientific heresy, it's like we were thrown back to the pre-Galileo's days when the church thought that the Earth was the center of the entire cosmos. In the astronomical community, Richard, let me underline this, the solar system is now being looked at as so unique, so bizarrely singular, so not like the 2,000 plus other solar systems that they've now cataloged, that they are beginning to talk openly and seriously that something different must have happened in the solar system. And in the last week, which I thought was kind of amusing because I'm coming on to talk tonight about our model, in the last week, a mainstream paper has been promoted around the Internet that the reason our solar system is so different from all these others is that Jupiter went on some kind of rampage, orbitally. Its gravity
it's spinning the wrong way.
Destroyed all the inner planets that originally had formed, the so-called super-Earths, 3 to 5 times Earth, and that the current crop of inner solar system planets is from the debris that managed to accrete in the wake of the solar system catastrophe billions of years ago, 4.5, 5 billion years ago at the dawn of the system, and what we got were Mercury, Venus, and Earth's moon, and Mars.
Is it Jupiter or Venus that rotates the wrong way?
Venus rotates backwards 243 days. And Uranus, the far outer planet, rotates on its side, almost 90 degrees to its orbit, lying down, spinning around the sun.
Could that be evidence of some cosmic war?
Well, you're sensing where we might go, but the ending's going to be different than what you think? No, it's not a war. It's design. In all of the solar systems that we have found, human beings, intelligent life based on water, based on the carbon-nitrogen cycle, all the stuff that we think, DNA, all of that makes up life as we know it here, can only exist if you have a solid planet with a surface exposed to a star that's going to live long enough to allow evolution to create life there and then not kill it a million years after it forms.
All right.
That's a long-lived solar system, and none of these other solar systems, because of the way they're shaped, their geometry,
Richard, I got to jump in here. I got that music coming up. Stay where you are. We'll come back and we'll discuss. Richard C. Hoagland here on the great program Coast to Coast AM. Richard Syrett sitting in for George Noory. Stay with us. Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, Christine McVie, John McMee, Mick Fleetwood, and Gypsy. They just defy age, don't they? They just keep rolling along, and we're all the better for it. We will get back to more of my conversation with Richard C. Hoagland as we discuss our solar system and how it appears to have been designed just for our existence here on planet Earth in just a few moments. Richard Syrett sitting in for George Noory, the intrepid one who's off making more episodes of Beyond Belief. My radio program up here in Toronto is called The Conspiracy Show, and you can hear it Sunday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern on AM 740. And we have about 30 affiliates in the United States and counting, and the website is richardsyrett.com. I've set up a special hashtag for this evening. It's Richard C2C. C, of course, is for Coast to Coast. Richard C, then the number 2C. Richard C2C. If you want to send us a tweet, please do so, and we'd be delighted to read it on the air. And we will get back to our conversation about the moon, Mars, and beyond with Richard C. Hoagland right here on Coast to Coast AM. And we are back with Richard C. Hoagland, the website, of course, enterprisemission.com. The moon, Richard, it's almost too precise. It's a remarkable celestial body. It just defies rational explanation of why it's there and why it is the way it is.
It is too precise, and the moon is part of the entire design. And I mean, this is such a huge concept in the new Pluto book, which is the tease for the one that I'm really working on, which is going to be called, I don't know if I can remember it now, The Heritage of Mars, Remembering Forever. Because the first Mars book I did, which has had, 5 editions now, is called The Monuments of Mars, A City on the Edge of Forever. I don't know how I intuited the forever part, but we're talking about a civilization, Richard, which was millions, if not hundreds of millions of years old. As
our ancestors.
I can now pin it down. This solar system started out like all the others that we've cataloged. Again, it is so mind-boggling to have the mainstream community say that the Earth and the solar system are unique. People died. The church, crucified and burned and slashed and drawn and quartered and did everything else during the Inquisition to prevent people from thinking that the Earth was not unique. We went through the whole scientific, the Reformation of the church and then the scientific revolution, and we've come to accept, the mantra, we're so incredibly ubiquitous that we're just average, and anything else out there has to follow the pattern that we see here. Well, it doesn't. This is such a huge wake-up call for science, and they're not talking about the size of it, but they're tiptoeing around the edges. Like this paper that came out a few days ago talks about how Jupiter is able to, in the models, in the computer models, careen through the inner solar system. I'm not quite sure how that works because you have to have something that nudges it.
Yeah, I mean, is it a planet or a failed star, Jupiter?
It's a kind of a failed star, a little bit bigger, and it would have been a double star system like Alpha Centauri. Did you see the news today about Alpha Centauri?
I did not.
There's now a paper out. Some guys, starting in 2013, 2014, with observations at major big telescopes on the Earth, they got some Hubble time finally. They think they found 2 super-Earths orbiting Alpha Centauri B, which is the second component of Alpha Centauri A, which is a double star system. Actually, it's a triple star system because there's C, which is Proxima Centauri, which is a little closer than the other two, at a little over 4 light years away. So the next door neighbor has planets, but they're not arranged anything like ours, because the farthest one out that they found in this new study orbits every 20.4 days. In fact, it's so damn close to 19.5 days, which another set of planets on the Kepler survey has indeed found, and twice 19.5, 39, that when you start seeing these numbers come up, you begin to wonder if ours is not the only solar system which was tinkered with and or remodeled, and that the Kepler list is actually a check that they're performing on the neighborhood and where the neighbors may have hung out, and where the last vestige of this super Type 2 civilization that I have proposed that did the remodeling of the solar system hundreds of millions of years ago still may hang out.
The moon, as part of that remodeling, just give us some of the specs on how crucial the moon is to life on this planet.
Well, the first thing that's really weird is if you didn't have the moon, the Earth pole would go flipping back and forth, like an angry rattlesnake. And that kind of obliquity shift, as it's called, meaning the pole changes angles with the sky, with the stars, not on the surface of the Earth. If you're on the surface of the Earth, you're not feeling anything. This is the inertial attitude, rotational attitude of the Earth relative to the inertial background stellar field. If that changes as rapidly as the calculations without a moon indicate, then life on Earth, certainly advanced life, but maybe even life itself, would not have been possible. The only reason that you got life on Earth in these models is because the moon is an incredibly stabilizing influence gravitationally in terms of standard Newtonian mechanics. Well, in our model, the reason that all works is because after you had an Earth and Mars and Venus and Mercury and the rest of the system literally rearranged, Richard, can you think of the gargantuan anti-gravity, anti-inertial, hyperdimensional technology required to literally, like billiard balls, shift planets around an orbiting star?
It's beyond my comprehension.
Well, all it takes is technological control of gravity and inertia. Well, bingo.
A level 2 civilization.
Another aspect of the Enterprise mission's research over the last 30-some years has been to verify that this physics is real and it can manipulate and change inertia and gravity. So all you'd have to do is build a machine to scale it up. We've got the measurements. And some of them are published in this new book, Pluto, New Horizons for a Lost Horizon, on the North Atlantic Books website and Amazon.
This leads me...
I'm plugging the book.
Okay.
Because I'm going to give another plug in a few minutes and connect all this to how we live here on Earth, Richard. It's really crucial to understand that part of this revolution, part of the second age of space, is not only the ability to allow ordinary folks to go out there, but to allow the stunning breakthroughs in science and treasure and technology and archives, the wonders and wisdom of this ancient civilization's libraries, to come back here and totally transform the Earth. Well, later tonight, I'm going to talk about a friend of mine, Charlie Lewis, who is an engineer. He's actually a polymath. He does a whole bunch of stuff really well. He's been a professional musician. He actually sang for years with a group you might have heard of. Oh, you're much, much too young. Called the Moby Grape.
Oh, I'm familiar.
Won a whole bunch of awards
Sure.
and all that.
Sure.
Well,
I'm not that
Charlie
young.
was one of the major players in Moby Grape. He's also been a civil engineer. He's designed airports. He basically reorganized LAX so it works. He saw some very bizarre things there the night of 9/11 that when he's on the show someday, which he will be soon, to talk about this incredible invention he's got, he'll maybe tell you about the background on, or maybe George, about the background on LAX and 9/11. This is a guy who's been around the block, around the planet, actually around the solar system quite a few times, and he's still kicking. Anyway, he's got this technology, which, Richard, is directly derivative from the physics we have figured out and measured, the same physics the ancients used to move planets around the solar system like billiard balls, and that technology manifests in an engine, an attachment, a modification of an ordinary IC engine, internal combustion engine, so that it burns hydrogen in a reactor that is attached to the top of the engine, circulates water through a coil, and then you electrolyze it, and then use the hydrogen to dump into the cylinders, and that basically lets you go down the road with zero pollution, as testified by the California air pollution folks that actually did the measurements and were astonished that they couldn't measure any pollution coming from Charlie's car. But the really amazing thing that Charlie himself didn't realize until I pointed it out to him, and this is years ago, is that his device, as he works with it, should not work. As you know, if you know any physics, Richard, the equation reads that you get as much energy out of splitting water and into oxygen and hydrogen as you get from putting them back together in a fuel cell or something like
that.
The
second law, right, of thermodynamics.
The second law of thermodynamics. You can't get more out than you put in. Charlie's machine, Charlie's engine gets more out than it puts in. I've ridden in it. I've done the measurements. I've looked at it. I've looked at the reports. And he himself was so excited about the zero pollution part and the fact that it's cheaper than gasoline that he really didn't realize that he was sitting on something that was so amazing that it takes us into the 23rd, it takes us into Star Trek land. It takes us into the realm of a true Type 2 civilization, taking this physics and make it work for ordinary people here on Earth. So the third thing I want to do tonight, and the reason I've been plugging the book is because if we make any money on the book, I'm going to take $1,000 and I'm going to dump it into Charlie's Kickstarter campaign from the Enterprise mission when he launches in the next few weeks, maybe even a few days, his entire technology in front of the entire Coast audience.
Where did Charlie get this technology? I mean, how did it come to him?
Well, he's been working with another inventor. You know, inventors tend to hang out, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. By the way, did you see the story the other day where Bill Gates says he couldn't hold a candle to Steve Jobs when it came to computers?
I did see that, yeah. I mean, well, what did you make of it?
Well, who knows? I mean, Bill is managerial and business, and Steve was invention and creativity. So they were a match made in heaven.
Yeah, indeed. You have to have the business mind. Absolutely.
Look, you know, and I know that Windows and Apple would not be the companies they are unless they had good, healthy, strong competition. The competition made them the top of the heap. Two totally different systems that you can go out anywhere in the world and now use. That's a revolution. That's the equivalent in the internet and cyberspace of what I'm talking about in terms of space. Access to space, access to who we really used to be, access to our own heritage, access to ways to make the world so much better that it is almost impossible to envision it unless you go back to the serials in the 30s and 40s and 50s, Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and, the so-called world of tomorrow, from the World's Fair in '64, to look at the kind of future that we can have, because we're not eternally committed and locked into fossil fuels, and we know those are, in the long term, very bad for this planet.
Richard, it sounds like we may be on the same page in this sense that I don't believe there are limits to growth. Do you concur?
Well, do you ever talk to Joseph Farrell?
I do, yes, good friend of mine.
Dr. Joseph Farrell? Okay. He and I have had some stunning conversations over the years, and he actually put a lot of this into one of his latest books. I think it was The Babylon Banksters.
Yes.
Where he talked about open and closed systems. The world is currently going nuts. This latest airplane thing is only one trivial example. Sorry, I'm so sorry for all those people. But on the scale of 7 billion people, imagine if everybody goes through something like that in the decades ahead. And that's where the projections of all the curves are heading. We're heading for disaster unless we change the game. We need a game changer. And space, according to Kennedy and the report from Iron Mountain, was the ultimate game changer because it changes the human condition from a closed system back to an open system in which we used to live, and why we lived so long and so well until something stunning happened, and that, of course, is what we have to figure out. But we need the time to figure it out, and we need the different places to put human beings in this century so that we do not run into the all our eggs in one fragile basket scenario.
We've got a break coming up in a few moments, but I want to start the discussion now, and we'll continue on after the break. And that is, again, about the moon and what China discovered on the moon. I know you've written about this extensively on your website. Let's start discussing that, because we know that a couple of years ago, China started their unmanned missions to the moon. And what exactly did they find there?
Well, they found the ruins. You know, long and the short of it. Go to enterprisemission.com. Just scroll down the page till you see the big Chinese banner and the ruins and the flag and the title and all that. Click on that and read to your heart's content the stunning confirmation that the Chinese quietly carried out at the end of last year, last December, when they landed this unmanned Chang 3 robot on the moon autonomously under computer control. And then a few hours later, they rolled off the little Jade Rabbit rover, which for 2 weeks went puttering around this landing site until, you know, I think it was the second sunset that did it in because of mechanical problems, and then it just could sit there and twitter home plaintively, "I'm here, I'm still alive, I'm here." But in the interim, they took stunning images, Richard, and they posted them on the Chinese Army military website showing these ruins. Now, what that does instantly is inform all those in the know, and you and I and the Coast audience are among those in the know, that all this stuff is real. The first thing the Chinese did was confirm their ancient glass ruins of inestimable age on the moon, and where there are ruins, there are going to be libraries. And with current technology, with current stupid primitive rockets, not forgetting all the neat stuff they have in the back room, the anti-gravity stuff, which I can document and others can document much, much better, have been developed and quietly hidden from view for the last half century, the same time they've been lying to us about everything that's out there. The fact is that even with rockets, you can go to the moon in 3 days. How do we know? Apollo proved that. Oh, wait. Apollo was a fake. Apollo, was done by, the U.S. government to, outbox the... No, the Chinese have verified on their CCD electronic imagery the same stuff the Apollo astronauts photographed on film almost half a century ago on the moon, looking the same way with the same crenellations and the same geometry and the same extent, meaning you have independent confirmation. And what's even more amazing, Richard, is you have independent political confirmation. When would you imagine the Chinese military would want to rescue NASA's bacon by proving that NASA didn't fake the moon missions? The moon missions, in fact, took place as usual, and what's been fake has been NASA reporting about what the astronauts actually found on the moon all those years ago.
Where did the Jade Rabbit land in 2013 in relation to the Apollo 11, the other Apollo missions on the moon? Whereabouts? The Sea of Rain.
Well, it landed about 1,200 miles to the northwest in a place called Mare Imbrium, as opposed to the Sea of Tranquility. It may be a little further. I haven't measured it recently. But what's really astonishing, and this is where things get really squirrely, Richard, this audience knows, and we'll see if you do too, that in my presentations over the years, as we've looked into this physics, which we learned from the geometry of the ruins at Cydonia, to recamp what's in Monuments of Mars, two numbers came out over and over and over again, 19.5 and 39. All right? 19.5 is the angle at which, north or south, all over the solar system, you have these energetic upwellings of internal lava, or on the outer giant planets, you have huge storms like the Great Red Spot, which swirl around at 19.5 south on Jupiter, and you have similar features on Saturn and Uranus and Neptune, coming and going in weird cycles, but apparently modulated by the physics of the entire solar system, which isn't constant. It is changing based on the orbits and revolutions of the members of the solar system. So with that as a baseline, where do the Chinese suddenly, without any warning, land their unmanned spacecraft on the moon? At 19.5 west. Now, the odds of that, it actually was 19.51 west. The odds of that to be accurate to within 1/100th of a degree, the probability, going back to the probability discussion, is thousands to one that that's an accident.
All right, very symbolic, obviously, and we'll find out what that means exactly when my conversation with Richard C. Hoagland continues here on Coast to Coast AM. Stay with us. And sitting in for George Noory, that's The Animals, Eric Burdon and The Animals. We've got to get out of this place. Sounds pretty good, pretty fresh for a song that is about 50 years old. What did he mean, we got to get out of this place? Planet Earth, perhaps? If we are to survive as a species, maybe that is the answer. We've got to get off of this rock. Back to more of my conversation with Richard C. Hoagland on just that very issue when Coast to Coast continues in a moment. Let me just remind you that my conference is coming up in April the 26th. It's a Sunday night. It's called Follow the Truth 2. You can get all the details. We've got 7 amazing speakers coming to Oshawa, just east of Toronto, a stone's throw from where I'm sitting. Again, Follow the Truth, and the website is followthetruth.tv. We've got amazing speakers talking about the Shroud of Turin, the Zapruder film, the Lost Tribes of Israel, UFOs, angels, and gods, remote viewing, spirit communication, and electronic harassment. Again, that's followthetruth.tv. All right, when we come back, Richard C. Hoagland here on Coast to Coast AM. Open lines coming up in less than 20 minutes. Right now, Richard C. Hoagland stays with us, and we'll get to your calls for Richard as well. Richard, before the break, you were talking about when this unmanned Chinese probe landed on the moon back in, I think, December 2013. Last minute, they changed the landing site, and you're saying that this was very symbolic. They were supposed to land... it was the Bay of Rainbows, and they landed in the Sea of Rain. And you're saying that was no accident.
Well, I don't think it was an accident because celestial mechanics is very predictable. You can predict the movement of planets ahead hundreds, thousands of years. You can certainly predict satellites. Well, even hours before they were landing, they were directing everybody, all their press, releases and their wonderful television. They did really great television during the landing. It took me way back many years when I was at CBS watching landings on various places on all the 42 TV screens in the control room. But what they didn't do was tell anybody where they were going to really land until they did it at 19.5 west. And the latitude is even more provocative because that was at 44 north. So if you were the Chinese and you were publicly showing that A, NASA had been lying to the American people for 50 years, and B, you were willing to show this data to the world, and you were communicating secret messages in a kind of an arcane code, which secret society used to do all the time, the 19.5 is easy. That means physics. That means revolution. It means total transformation of the way we do business in space and on Earth and every place else if you democratize this technology. What's the other number? What does 44 mean? Any guesses, Richard?
Well, it sounds like it's some sort of a geometric figure.
No, 44. Think political.
Oh, the 44.
The 44th President of the United States of America.
Okay.
The Chinese message was to Obama, either make this stuff known or we will.
Disclosure. Okay.
And the clock is ticking. And the Europeans have been going out to this astonishing comet, 67P, sending back stunning images day after day since last August, where the thing is obviously an ancient, incredibly eroded space habitat, an artifact, It's not a natural ice ball or a snowball, as the astronomer at Harvard, Fred Whipple, said decades ago. It's an ancient spaceship still spewing out internal gases from oxygen and nitrogen and other reservoirs of volatiles to have kept, I don't know how many millions of people alive, and a volume 2.5 miles across, and now it's in total ruin, except studded across the surface here and there. We see very bright, very sharp, very geometric, very symmetrical, very streamlined, very spaceship-like looking stuff, which looks like much more recent civilizations in the long and incredibly storied history of the human race that we're not being allowed to know about, actually sent probes out to 67P, just like the Rosetta probe and the little Philae lander, and they landed on the comet to sample it because maybe this object is an archive. Maybe, in fact, it is like other exotic, bizarre objects scattered around the solar system. It's where NASA and the other space agencies are going, because that's where the real history of who we really are has really been stored for literally millions and millions and millions of years as a prelude to the NASA flyby mission in a few months of Pluto, which in the book, in Pluto New Horizons for a Lost Horizon, I say flatly, with supporting data, is potentially an ancient archive placed in that exotic orbit to attract our attention and get us to ultimately go there.
Well, going back to these structures on the moon, and are they not visible? Would they not be visible to an amateur, someone with a telescope here on Earth? Could we not see them from Earth?
They are. They have been. When I wrote with Mike Barra, Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA, which I did not do with North Atlantic, I did it with Feral Press. That's also in, I think, 3 editions or 4 editions, something like that. But anyway, in that book, there are photographs from high-end amateurs. I found 3 amateurs who were using top-of-the-line equipment, cameras, telescopes, electronic image processing, computer algorithms, noise suppression, the 9 yards. I mean, these are guys are basically professionals, except they don't get paid to do what they do. They do it because they love it. And amateur astronomy has galloped so far ahead of where it was when I joined it back in the 60s, you wouldn't even recognize it. I mean, you can have observatories now sitting in folks' garages or in their backyards that can give you images of the universe and planets that no telescope on Earth even 2 decades ago could give you. None. Zero. Not even Palomar or Keck or whatever. And now guys with 14-inch telescopes are bringing back images like Damien Peach in England, who's a brilliant guy at this. Just, Google his name, look at his archives, his galleries. He's photographing these ruins on the moon by defeating the blurring effects of the Earth's atmosphere by electronically storing thousands of images taken through a telescope on something called a webcam. And then the software records and saves and stacks on top of each image only the ones where the blurring has been stopped because the atmosphere froze for that moment and the telescope camera took a picture in that millisecond when the atmosphere was still. And by summing these hundreds and thousands of images, you can get images of the moon like the Apollo astronauts sitting in orbit, but from 250,000 miles away, and it's not controlled, it's not any, the black ops guys, the men in black don't show up and say you can't put these pictures on the internet. And so the images of these stunning, awesome, megalithic ruins in every sense of that word, meaning big, big stuff, are lying there for amateur astronomers with the right techniques and the right expertise to photograph them every night the moon is visible, and they have done so. And they're all over the web. Just go looking. Or we'll assemble them in the next book, the one after Pluto, and you can go to One Stop Shopping and you can see it all there. Now, tonight, you've noticed I plugged a couple of books kind of mercilessly, Richard, and I'm kind of not sorry I'm doing that, because the only way we're going to get the kind of technological revolution that's going to save this planet is if we somehow extract out of the dark, sciences and the black ops crowd these technologies, and we make them public, and we democratize them, and we get them out there so that we can get off fossil fuels and all the other things that are killing the earth and defiling the environment and ruining the ecosystems from pole to pole, and we get with the program and become a Type 2 civilization as rapidly as possible. And my friend Charlie has a technology which can do that, and do it right now. No imagining, no whatever. There's going to be some developments around his technology in the next few weeks that are going to boggle your mind. And all I will say is there is a major, how can I say this without giving away secrets? There's a major public component from Hollywood that's going to be involved with Charlie very soon in a very public way. So this is moving at Warp 9, and I don't want you guessing. No guessing, because it only works if you don't, do it the way that the guesses.
No, I understand. When I think of Charlie, and I haven't met Charlie, I don't know Charlie. I'm thinking of people like Stanley Myers and the water engine, and I'm just hoping, and I'm not being flippant here or disrespectful. I hope Charlie has some protection around him, because this is very dangerous technology.
Well, hang on. Let's not sow paranoid seeds. That was then. This is now. The technology is timed to come out. Why do you think Elon Musk has been given permission? I will underscore that. Why has Elon Musk been given permission after half a century to do what Wernher von Braun wanted to do a half century ago, but was never allowed to do it? What do you think the magic is that Elon is using to bring back rockets and reuse them, to land the first stage and someday the second stage and the third stage safely back on Earth, truck them over to the assembly building, dust off the dust, and put them on the pad and fire them again, which is going to slash the cost of you and me and George, because I promised, going into space to 1/100th, if not less, of the current cost to send people to and from space and bring them back safely. Why is that revolution suddenly taking place on Elon Musk's watch? Is there something magical? Has he figured out something nobody else figured out? No. It's steamboat time. The lid is being lifted, and we can see it in the NASA releases of images of stunning ancient stuff, artificial stuff on Mars, and ESA, and the Chinese. And what are the Indians doing tonight? The Indian nation. They have a spacecraft orbiting Mars called the MOM mission. Remember that awful movie, Moms from Mars, or Mothers from Mars, or something like that a few years ago? Anyway, the MOM mission, the Mars Orbital Mission, that's what the acronym stands for, is measuring globally on Mars the same thing that the Curiosity rover suddenly, surprisingly, just a few days ago found in Gale Crater, which is methane, which comes and goes in a sporadic, non-cyclic appearance and disappearance, which has baffled the geologists, the biologists, the exobiologists, and the Indian government is perfectly positioned to take measurements globally, far beyond the Gale Crater where Curiosity is roving, to see what the global methane concentrations are, to match what the Earth-based astronomers from a few years ago found with Earth-based telescopes, and then put it all together in a picture that says either Mars now has current living life of some kind releasing methane, or, even more interesting, Mars is releasing methane from underground reservoirs where, like fossil fuel generation here on Earth from ancient organisms, the methane is coming from decaying organisms buried under huge mounds of rubble and muds and silts and sediments and debris during the Mars catastrophe millions of years ago. And the methane is not from current biology, except maybe a few microbes. It's from the fermentation and decay of the once vibrant biosphere that NASA is in every way possible letting us see with increasing revelations of the science underpinning biology, like methane that it announced a few days ago, and then a few days later it announced it found nitrogen in nitrates, which are critical for any life cycle organisms on this planet. So drip, 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 creeping disclosure is well underway, and at some point the rubber is going to meet the road, and we're going to have disclosure. And if Steve is listening, it's going to be artifacts first and little guys or big guys in spaceships second.
I also understand, Richard, that the Chinese are very interested in helium-3, which is to be found in abundance on the moon.
Not really.
No?
No, it's a total canard. It's a hoax. It's a fake. There is not a helium-3 reactor on the planet, Richard. Have you seen one? Have you seen any tests? Has anybody done any experiments? There's nothing technological to dump helium-3 in, even if someone was getting ready to do it, and they're not. But what it does do is to give the Chinese a wonderful excuse, where the 19.5 is a code, that they're going to the moon to look at resources and the physics of the moon, up to and including maybe the physics to be found in artifacts they could bring back to Earth. Do you know the Chinese are now prepping for a moon sample return mission to bring some of the stuff that it roves around and finds back to laboratories in China? Well, if you look at the pictures from the Chang 3 mission and from U2, it landed amid an ancient city, and what those things that look like boulders, in fact, are not. They're pieces that fell out of the dome overhead of high-tech, very remarkable glasses, which have extraordinary technological properties if you analyze them with the proper instrumentation. And isn't it interesting that the Chinese have published no in-depth analyses of the surface materials found around the landing site at all, other than the pre-mission projections of what they would find in the way of basalts and creep and various rare earths and stuff like that. They also did a complete seismic survey of what's underneath, and if you look at the seismic pictures they published on the web, there are regular layers that can be interpreted one of two ways, either ordinary geology or layers of buried cities under the surface of the moon that we saw on the pictures.
So I get the sense here, Richard, very clearly that the Chinese are really, tightening the screws on the Americans in terms of disclosure. How much longer do they have then before they must disclose or have things disclosed for them? Well,
given that we apparently do live on a pluralistic planet, and given that the kind of technologies that have been held in deep cover, like Charlie's. By the way, I need to give out Charlie's website, HEAE.biz. HEAE.biz. It stands for High-End Alternative Energy, HEAE.biz, because with Charlie and Musk and a whole bunch of garage inventors, the governments of the world, the suppressors, the folks that have been keeping all this secret all over the planet, unified, the Russian program, the European program, the Chinese program, our NASA program, they're about to get upstaged by the private sector, by good old enterprise, free enterprise. What a nice ring to it, enterprise.
Yes, indeed. Hey, quick question, Richard. Now, these people that have been covering up this, they've got blood on their hands. Do you give them amnesty?
Well, no, don't say that. We don't know that. We know that they will be accused of hiding everything, which is why they're dumping all the good stuff into the files, because they know that most reporters these days are so lazy they won't do a Google search past a couple of years. And if they find artifacts and they find us jumping up and down saying, look at that, look at that, look at that, NASA will be able to claim politically successfully that they have never been hiding anything going back to the beginning of NASA. And if they actually slip in really interesting things from the early days, which they've been doing quietly, even in the Apollo archives, but not telling anybody, they will get away with it. And frankly, I don't give a damn. I don't want to send anybody to Leavenworth. I want to get the human race off one ball of dust, because as Elon Musk says, unless we get out of the Earth basket, we are trapped. His desperation to get the human race planted on Mars is one of the driving forces behind his entire company. He's not your average entrepreneur. He's not your average billionaire. All the stuff he's doing could have been done 50 years ago, so why wasn't it? Because, Richard, in our model, it wasn't politically time, and now it is, and it's like the 1950s all over again. Have you seen those pictures? See them on the Coast website, because Lex has somehow beamed up and I have not heard a peep from him, even though I sent the images over hours ago. So you might find out from our producer tonight if these images can get posted on the Coast website.
We'll get on that. Richard, listen, I have to run, and What a great pleasure finally getting to meet with you and speak with you. Thank you so much for this. EnterpriseMission.com. Richard C. Hoagland. Open lines on a Friday night going into Saturday morning. Here on Coast to Coast, Richard Syrett sitting in for George Noory. You, me, and the telephone. Please. Great to be here with you on a Friday night into Saturday morning, sitting in for George Noory. And if you want to find out more about his internet television program, Beyond Belief, just head on up to the website, coasttocoastam.com, and just click on the link there on the homepage, and you can find out how to subscribe. In the meantime, our webmaster, Sean Ladouceur, has posted some great stories in the news section, including results of the largest ever genetic study of a single population, which could help refine dates for major events during human evolution. The article published in The Guardian is entitled, Study Shows Humans Are Evolving Faster Than Previously Thought. We came back from the break with Sly and the Family Stone, If You Want Me to Stay. And Sly Stone, I just think, is an absolute genius, underappreciated. I believe celebrated his 72nd birthday recently. And the last I heard, Sly Stone was essentially homeless, living in a van somewhere in Los Angeles. Looking for confirmation on that, but that's a sad story if true. All right, we will be back with open lines. Can't wait to dive into the phone calls here on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast. Richard Syrett sitting in for George Noory, and we're floating the hashtag RichardC2C. Richard, C as in coast, the number 2, C as in coast. Richard, hashtag RichardC2C. Matthew tweets, yeah, y'all think the previous civilizations were onto something? Moon being a goddess and Mars being a god? ? All right, let's go to the phones, and we'll begin with the wild card line. Bill is in West Hartford, Connecticut. Good morning, Bill. Welcome to Coast. How are you?
It's good, thank you, Richard. Hi. I want to give you my thought and question, the same thing that I wanted to ask the other Richard C. Hoagland last hour, but I couldn't. So I'll ask you. Regarding the space program, regarding what Richard talked about, the new age of space, the second age of space, I'm thinking in terms of the next manned American space flight, or at least manned in the sense that it can carry astronauts. That's Project Orion. As you know, this past December, 3 months ago, was the first unmanned test, Earth orbit test of Orion, 2-orbit mission around the Earth, and it was totally successful, 101% successful. Well, my thought was the next mission with Orion, added to the brand new huge rocket, SLS, Space Launch System rocket, that is scheduled for early 2018, 3 years from now. Not only do I think it should be manned instead of unmanned as is planned as of now, as I mentioned to Richard a couple of months ago, last time he was on Coast, but the point I wanted to ask Richard tonight, and I'll ask you, for the sake of world peace, considering what's going on in Ukraine, especially right now, fears of World War III with Russia, to cement ties with the United States and Russia, as well as to cement more ties in space between the United States and Russia, as we've been doing for the past 15 years with the ISS, the International Space Station. Like today, there was the mission, with Scott Kelly going into space with another Russian astronaut, another Russian cosmonaut, and a third Russian cosmonaut. The two people, the American astronaut, the Russian cosmonaut, will stay in the ISS for a whole year. My point is, could in 2018 that unmanned Orion SLS mission be manned with 2 American astronauts and 2 Russian cosmonauts, because it can hold 4 people altogether. Why not have 2 Americans and 2 Russians go together and have sort of an Apollo 8 of the 21st century where they orbit the moon without landing with 2 Americans and 2 Russians? 3 years from now, they could start the training right now. President Obama could announce it soon, this year, 2015, and that would still bring the world together, thinking that in just 3 years, America and Russia will go to the moon together. What do you think of this?
Well, I think it's pie in the sky. What I look at happening down here, I think we're already in the midst of another Cold War, and in many ways, I think we are already in an undeclared World War III. I know that sounds bizarre or a little harsh.
And scary, that's what I'm saying. What I just said, could that turn that around? If right away President Obama says we're going to go as soon as we can, which is maybe late 2017, early 2018, with the Orion spacecraft that is compatible with humans. This second Orion mission could have people in there survive. It'll have environmental controls and all of that. So why not 2 American astronauts and the other 2 be 2 Russian cosmonauts?
I would love to see that, Bill, and you would as well. I think we all would. But the current tensions out there, Vladimir Putin, I don't think, wants anything to do with Barack Obama. I don't think he trusts him. I think that the distrust is mutual. And I can't think of a time when tensions have been this high. We'd have to go back to even the early days of the Cold War, like to the Cuban Missile Crisis, this type of situation. That's where we're headed.
Well, today Scott Kelly went up with 2 Russians to the ISS in Earth orbit, and they're going to stay for a year, and we've been doing that with the Russians for the last 15 years, till about the year 2000 or 1998. So going out to the moon is even more dramatic and spectacular. We could do that. If we can go to Earth orbit with Russia, we can go to the moon to orbit it and eventually land with Russians to the moon.
Yeah,
together.
I just think that would. Yes, I just think that would take such a huge commitment beyond what they're doing right now. But Bill, let's hold on to that. Let's hope for that. That would certainly be a harbinger of better relations and so forth. But I wish I could be more positive about it. I just think we're heading into some pretty turbulent waters right now. Let's go to wild card line again, and Travis is at Mayaca, Florida. Travis, did I pronounce that right?
Yes, you did, sir.
Mayaca, whereabouts is that in Florida?
It's a little east of Tampa, a little to the south.
All right, Travis, where do you want to take us?
Sir, I'd just like to know where you are thinking on the whole thing of there's more out in the universe than there is. That all the scientists say, we might find some kind of something on, this planet or whatever. But honestly, I don't think we can, say that. There's so much out there. I just want to know your opinion on it.
Are you asking me my thoughts on life elsewhere in the universe?
Yeah,
intelligent life.
Life, yeah.
Well,
because we can't be the only thing here,
Why not? Why not? Listen, I'll be honest with you. I'm going to lay my cards on the table. I come at this from I'm a Christian, and that may come as it's not a very popular thing to say these days, and I happen to believe in the Bible, for better or worse. I think that we exist in a real sweet spot in the universe. When you look at the cosmic radiation and asteroid belts and things like that, not only are we in a sweet spot in the Milky Way, we are in a sweet spot in our solar system. And why is it, inconceivable to think that we are in fact alone? If we are not alone, where are they? I mean, I know we've had 150 million sightings of UFOs since 1947, according to a UN report. Who's to say what they are? Maybe they're from another dimension. Maybe they're not extraterrestrial. I happen to believe they're interdimensional. Maybe they're from an angelic or a demonic realm. So in terms of... Go ahead.
I'm sorry. It could be, sir. I've been trying to disguise my voice a little bit. I'm Travis from... And it could be that there is so much out there that we know nothing of anything. We are just children learning to walk.
Oh, I certainly believe that. That's true. We are children. But as to your question,
I think of us as we're children. We got training wheels. They're flying fighter jets. We got, they're doing all this stuff, but we got training wheels, and we're going. I think I can move the pedal a little bit. You know what I'm saying? That's how I take it. I'd like to say I love your website. Very good. And I love Coast to Coast, and I'm a big fan.
Appreciate it, Travis. Thanks for checking in from Mayaca, Florida. All right, we are going to the wild card line again, and this time it's Mark in Branson, Ontario?
Brampton, Ontario.
Brampton. I should know that. You're just down the road from where I'm perched. Mark, welcome to Coast. Good morning. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you, Richard?
Very well, thank you.
Hi. What I wanted to talk to you about and ask you about, you said you're a Christian. That's pretty amazing. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on geocentrism, and I was wondering if you think that NASA's blue marble picture taken in 1972 by the Apollo 17, if that's a little slip or a little leak of evidence because there's no blurred lines in that picture. It's almost like evidence that the Earth does not move.
You're asking me? Well, no. I mean, I believe that the Earth orbits the sun, and
really,
yeah.
So,
yeah.
How do you explain the blue marble picture then? Because there's no blurred lines in it at all.
No blurred lines in it. I don't know how to explain that. I'm not a scientist from NASA.
It's mapped at a distance of 45,000 kilometers from Earth, and there's no blurred lines in it. You can perfectly see the crisp-cut lines of Africa, like it's evidence that the Earth doesn't move.
Is it? Is that what it means? I'm not so sure.
That's what I see. I know. That's what I'm asking you. Because you said you believe in the authenticity of the Bible, and there's many verses in the Bible that says, like Psalm 93:1, the Earth is stationary and fixed, not moving.
Well, I'd have to go back and revisit Psalms. I say I'm a Christian, maybe not a very good one. Maybe I need to study my Bible a little more closely. So where is that chapter again?
Psalm 93:1, Psalm 93:1, Psalm 96:10, Psalm 104:5. I think, 104:5. They all say the same thing. The Earth is fixed and not moving. Then,
well, that's a new one on me.
Have you heard of Dr. Robert Sungenius?
I have not.
Oh yeah, that's actually I stumbled upon this. I was just doing research, studying different things, and I stumbled upon this, and I found that there's actually a lot of viable evidence that supports geocentrism. Like, you think of the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon like a cosmic-sized Tesla coil. Like, the Earth is the stationary core, and the Sun is the moving charge, and the Moon is the stabilizer.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's more evidence for it. Yeah, well, maybe we need to do a show on that. Although some might say, well, if you're going to talk about that, why not talk about a flat Earth? Do you believe in a flat Earth?
No, I don't believe in a flat Earth. I believe because the picture shows that you can clearly see that the Earth is a ball. But I'm just thinking, like, because of the EM field, because EM field is stronger than gravity, and because Earth is lined up, this would explain the inner workings of the Earth. The inner workings of the Earth is like a gyroscopic system, all the way down to now they've discovered just 2 months ago, inner core.
All right, well, Mark, now you've got me curious, and I'm going to go back and delve into the Bible and Psalms and take a look at that.
When I stumbled upon it, and it's like, wow, like.
Mark, I appreciate your call. Thank you for that. All right, let's go back to the wild card line. Thomas is in La Jolla, California. Oh, we lost Thomas. All right. East of the Rockies, Britt is in Garland, Texas. Hello, Britt. Good morning. Welcome to Coast. How are you?
I'm doing great, Richard. Hey, I have my own little hypothesis about how these, for lack of a better word, ancient astronauts may have moved around the heavenly bodies of our solar system. It's based on Zecharia Sitchin's book, 12th Planet, where he talks about how they were mining gold in order to powderize it and put it in the atmosphere to protect it. But you know about the white powder of gold version of the platinum group elements, that they're highly energized forms of these metallic atoms that have unusual properties. What if you sprinkled the atmosphere of the planet, or put around in a spherical manner the around the planet you wanted to move this white powder gold, which will when energized, reduce by half approximately the gravitational weight of an object, as proven in laboratory experiments. So then if you arranged like sort of like a billiard game, you took a rogue planet and sent it through the solar system, and these arcs of lightning would take place when the planets get close enough together for their space charge sheaths to reach a sort of ability to exchange massive amounts of electrical potential, as talked about in Velikovsky, where he says that, according to mythology, the way he interprets it, that planets exchanged lightning bolts as they passed in the ancient past, and so that would allow, if they were really good about it, and of course they had to be really good. They're smarter than God, and they probably a bad phrase to use, but they probably could line up the whole thing and like turn Uranus on its side. They could move planets to the exact orbit they want them to be. And I just thought I'd float that idea out there and see what somebody else thought about it.
Well, that's a really complicated issue, Britt. I guess my problem with that is, if you have a civilization, and you mentioned Sitchin, and so we're talking about the Anunnaki, and they swing by on Nibiru in this strange orbit that it has, however long it takes to get here, 30,000 years or whatever it is. If they have that capability, and this sort of dialing back to Richard C. Hoagland, they are essentially a level 2 type civilization. In other words, they have power. They have harnessed the power of the sun. We think of stars as essentially a furnace, right? And these stars produce all of the elements that we have here on Earth and elsewhere in the universe. If they can do that, why do they need to come to Earth to mine gold? I mean, they have the ability, I would think, they would be real alchemists. They'd be able to produce gold by other means. They wouldn't have to come here, create some sort of a primitive human alien hybrid in order to mine the gold and then take it back and use the gold for their atmosphere. That's Sitchin's theory, I guess. That part doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I kind of have an answer for that too.
I'll bet you do.
In our part of the galaxy, that gold is plentiful, and in other places it's not. And this seems to be a really unique place because we seem to be constantly visited by people from somewhere else. And also because of the unique play of hyperdimensional forces and fields that are created by this huge number of planets we have in our solar system compared to the ones they've seen so far out there, that it could be that we may not be necessarily alone, but we're like the most interesting place in the galaxy possibly, and we have the most interesting elements in our crust of our planet.
All right, they're here for the gold. I'm a gold bug myself. When is it going to rise above $1,200 an ounce? That's what I want to know. We'll get back to your calls here on Open Lines. Coast to Coast AM, Richard Serrett sitting in for George Norrie. Stay a while. There she is, the matriarch of R&B, Miss Peaches, as she was known, born Gemzetta Hawkins, and widely credited as having bridged the gap between rhythm and blues and rock and roll, and she had 6 Grammys and 17 Blues Music Awards to her credit. That is, of course, Etta James, and Something's Got a Hold of Me. We are trending the hashtag Richard C2C. Richard, C as in coast, 2, the number 2, and C as in coast. Hashtag Richard C2C. And thanks to Moonlink's Diva for this. I was wondering about whatever happened to Sly Stone. We played one of his tracks a little earlier in the program, and I was lamenting the fact that the last I'd heard, Sly Stone was homeless, essentially, living in a van now in his early 70s, somewhere in Los Angeles. But Moonlink's diva has set me straight. She says that Sly recently won a $5 million judgment against his former manager and lawyer, and so he certainly won't be homeless now. Well, that's good news, if true, and we'll look into that. Thanks, Moonlink's diva. All right, back to open lines, and we'll do that in just mere moments here on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast, Richard Syrett sitting in for George Norrie. The website, richardsyrett.com, and you can say hello on Twitter at Richard Syrett. Before I get back to the calls, I just want to throw another log on the fire here. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when I was on the program last mid-March. 3 weeks ago, had a small fire in our condo here in North Toronto. Kind of a rookie mistake, an unattended pot of wax on the stove. And I had my head down, buried in my work, in my computer, my headset on. Didn't hear the smoke alarm go off. Long story short, in the rush to get this pot out of the condo and out onto the veranda, my wife and I sustained, I would guess, second-degree burns, pretty serious burns to our hands. And just weeks prior to that, as luck would have it, I went down to Niagara Falls to visit a gentleman who I've had on my radio show up here, who's a bit of an inventor. He's written a book or a pamphlet about a carburetor that gets 100 miles to the gallon. And in addition to that, he also makes his own colloidal silver. And he mentioned when we went down to pick up a couple of bottles, he said this stuff is great. Just it comes in a spray bottle. You can spray it on cuts and burns, and it'll heal pink eye, conjunctivitis. Now, he's making this claim. I'm not. We have to be careful about that. Anyway, colloidal silver, it's been around for 1,000 years, and it has all sorts of uses. But he mentioned, that it's good for burns. So after we sustained these burns in the condo, we immediately remembered the colloidal silver. So we ran and we sprayed it on our hands. And in fact, we had a big bottle of it. We poured that in another pot, and we soaked our hands in this colloidal silver. Now, over the next couple of days and the next week, both our hands, they looked horrible. I mean, the blisters, as you can imagine. If you've seen someone who's been in a fire, I tell you, we should have been in excruciating pain. I remember having a slight burn, touching a stove as a child, just the corner of my finger, and you know what it's like. The pain was incredible. And yet, here I had, and my wife had, second-degree burns to our hands and a little bit of discomfort. My wife had some open sores on her hand because her blisters had popped, not to get too graphic. However, I really can't say that I had any pain whatsoever, and I think it must have been the colloidal silver. Wondering if you've ever had any experience with colloidal silver. Do you use it? What do you use it for? And what experiences have you had? We'll throw that log on the fire as well. And in the meantime, we'll go once again to the wild card line. And Catherine is in New York City, my favorite city. Catherine, good morning and welcome to Coast.
Oh, hey, good morning, and thank you for taking my call. Gosh, I wish it was under better circumstances. I am very proudly and angrily calling from the East Village in New York City. Have you heard what happened?
Are you talking about the building collapse?
The gas explosion.
It was a horrible situation.
Collapsed and others damaged. I'm 2 blocks away from it.
Horrible situation.
Disgusting. It's officially a crime scene.
What's happening, Catherine? Can you update us?
In a few minutes, I'll tell you. Yes, I will. And I'm not gonna. I don't relay gossip. Anything that I say is through, confirmed through official sources. There was a building. These are all like 6, 7-story buildings, or were. They're now absolutely rubble. And 12 other buildings are not allowed to be occupied. At least 2 people are missing. One gentleman was eating with a sushi restaurant, one of the workers. Basically, what happened is the building owner wanted to install a larger gas pipe service to the building. It had twice been told by our utility is called Con Ed. Twice it failed inspection. Now we got a situation here, which is probably very common, where the licensed, this work is supposed to be done by specially licensed plumbers. Unfortunately, they never have to be on the site. What they do is send, obviously, less than qualified workers or subcontractors to do the actual work, and these license holders just sit in their office and sign off on the paperwork. And the city buildings department finds that acceptable. That's got to change, obviously. But what happened was they wanted to upgrade. They had like an 1.5-inch pipe going through. They had put in 3-inch pipes, and they were waiting for Con Ed had to approve it and then do the actual connection to the gas main, which again, twice they said absolutely not. And that's just, to me, stupid. How could a contractor who's supposed to be educated do that work and then have it be so egregiously unacceptable? But anyway, Con Ed had been there about 2 o'clock, and they again said absolutely not. We're not going to connect this. It's not up to code.
But then they did. Then apparently they restored it shortly before the blast.
No, absolutely not. The Con Ed, the utility, never restored it. It was
the construction workers. Construction workers did.
The mayor said it was inappropriately.
Right. The illegal. Yes, this was illegal, but the construction workers turned it on again.
Yep.
Yeah. This is.
The building owners, they went in there and they hooked it up anyway. And then the restaurant, owner or manager smelled strong gas shortly.
And nobody
after
called
that.
911. Nobody called 911, even though they smelled gas. That's the strange thing.
No, well, that implies to me that the restaurant owner or whomever from the restaurant who just called the owner knew that something was fishy that they did not want to alert the authorities to. Because just about a month ago, our utilities sent basically like scratch and sniff postcards to every household and business that said, this is what gas smells like. If you smell it, by the time you smell it, do not second guess yourself. You call emergency immediately, and you're supposed to evacuate before you call, because even pushing the buttons on a phone can spark an explosion like this. There were police department crime scene trucks all over there today. I hope those responsible are arrested and charged with murder, charged with attempted murder. This has got to stop. We had just about a few months ago, thank God, the mayor cracked down on the building department. Payoffs within the building department were just so ubiquitous that I believe it was half of the building inspectors who actually got arrested for taking bribes. And that's what goes on, is that these building owners know that there's no muster behind these rules, these safety laws, and they know that they can skirt them and apparently not care. And this is what happens. My building could have blown up a year ago. The building superintendent, he used to live in the building and he was moving to one of the other buildings. He ripped out his stove. He wanted to take it with him. He's not supposed to have done the work. He did it. He ripped the stove out. He left the gas line open enough that I smelled gas, and apparently I'm one of the few people who really know what it smells like. I called immediately, and when the Con Ed came, they shut off the utility to the whole building. They said that an explosion was imminent if the situation had gone on, if the gas had leaked for a couple more hours in my building. The pipes were condemned. They were so old that Con Ed refused to reconnect it, and the building owner fought having to put in new pipes. And when they finally did, they upped our rent because of, having to correct the dangerous situation.
Well, Catherine, thank you for the update. This is a horrific situation, and let's hope, as you say, that those that were negligent, and God forfend that anyone dies. There are still missing individuals. But if any loss of life has ensued, then let's hope that they bring the hammer down hard on those responsible. Catherine in New York City, I appreciate the update. Let's go to the wild card line again, and is it Klaatu in Fountain, Colorado? Good morning.
Yes, it is. How you doing, Rich?
I'm well, Klaatu.
All right. Thanks, for letting me on. Am I coming across all right before we go on?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, all right. Great. But, again, you invited at the beginning of the show open lines and that, someone could call in and basically steer the ship. Well, is that still open? Because have I got a ride for you all?
All right. Take us.
All right. And, it was great tonight, too. And, Mr. Hoagland was on. And he's kind of involved with this, but it's very interesting. He was right. Whether you know it or not, Richard, you're spot on. You're spot on this code talk. What am I talking about? What is Hoagland talking about? What is this code talk he's talking about? Let's go to Brookings. This might take a little time, but I want to break it down from what I see and where we're at. And this disclosure that's coming forth to which no one can talk about goes back to Brookings. Under what circumstances will we be presented or withheld? Think of it as a riddle. Under what circumstances will we be presented or withheld data and or disclosure, information of disclosure? Now, what if that became policy? And he said this to me on my show years ago. But what if that became policy? And to which total suppression, as he said in the past, and also on your show, and possibly with you even, forgive my ignorance there. And, I like you, by the way. I like you. You're spot on with a lot of the things. That's why he's right of what you said. It's like you're following along easily. And in how I see this code speak and what he's really alluding to of our model of the solar system, we have a solar system model, a mathematical problem, an artifact, an alien artifact, with the hint of intelligence being given to us under Brookings now, mind you. Under what circumstances will we be presented or withheld data and or disclosure of what they found out there? Like, you're familiar with the X-Files, correct?
Oh, yes, and it's coming back.
All right. The truth is out there. Indeed. What if it's out there, in fact, in things that we've already seen over the years, or may not have seen, obviously, in this case, but to many people. But maybe now some, thanks to me and the effort behind it, and Hoagland's kicking my behind in some ways to get me to see it, I believe. But we won't get into that. I want to focus on the model of Brookings, which what he was saying alludes exactly to what I found, and he was right at the end when basically someone's saying, hey, it's time. The time to either get it out or someone else is going to do it. Again, that falls back to the hint of Brookings. Under what circumstances will we be presented with data via videos, acclamation? What if all this is an acclamation program leading to which is being discussed on the surface is just a surface, a cover, a circle, a cover story that is coded in ways that can connect over years even if you follow a script, and to which spells out a scenario. If you see that script and you change that script from the surface for the Type 2 civilization and code, which would mean the undersurface, the story undercover. There's two tracks. Second track diplomacy, Hoagland would say. There's two tracks. One track on the surface where it's an official story, as it was, a cover story. But if you have certain knowledge of key points, like I've learned over the years and that he's helped me to see, mind you, it leads us to see a disclosure which brings an unofficial disclosure, especially by individuals pointed out in this, literally.
Let me just jump in, Klaatu, and let me ask you. Let me just cut to the quick here because we've got a break coming up. And let me ask you, what is it going to take? Because you mentioned, this is policy. Well, some might argue that we've had this disclosure policy since Truman, when the whole UFO ET issue, for example, was placed in private hands for, back engineering and development of alien technologies and so forth. So we've had 70 years of this disclosure policy. What's it going to take? Is it going to be the Chinese forcing the U.S.'s hands? What's it going to take for disclosure to happen? Because I don't necessarily think it's ever going to happen. I don't think we even need it to happen at an official level.
Well, this has to come first. According to what I see in this code down through time, I call it, Hoagland leading me again behind the surface unofficially. On the surface, he's talking whatever, and he has talked whatever. We'll get into, we won't get into that. What I'm saying is the science and the model of what he said on your show. I'm going to paint that picture, and it's going to prove it. It's going to vindicate his words, to which he will be, validated. Vindicated.
Okay, but you've got about 50 seconds. Can you get it done in about 50 seconds?
Get a video called UFO Diaries. Watch that opening line very carefully. It's the model, the solar system scale model Hoagland's referring to in code. Hoagland in code is NASA. When he says NASA, he's referring to himself. I'm painting it. I'm going to prove it. FacesOfMars.com. I'd really like to be a guest on your show, sir, to talk a couple hours about this, because it will blow you and your audiences away. And in fact, it's what Hoagland really wants. So officially on the surface, he won't admit it. But I'm painting the picture using his own words, leading the way. This is not a coincidence. Again, based on Brookings. He also told me my voice once was going to be at the head of the wave of the straight disclosure, and that my voice was going to be a huge part in it. In this acclamation program, at the time, I thought it was my radio show. No, he said I had a job for him to do. Well, I've been helping him over the years. I think I see what that job is, because on the surface, he can never admit it to me. On the surface, he has to attack me and attack anyone until, like you said, it's time to when it's allowed, to when the officials can possibly acknowledge it.
So your suggestion here, Klaatu, is that Richard C. Hoagland is being used as part of this controlled disclosure. Is that the idea?
But it has affected my life, not just as an audience.
Well, if it's true, it's going to affect all of our lives, isn't it?
Remember what he said, Richard, about a game changer? I'm the game changer to the game that's exposing and showing his code, where on the surface it destroys him because of his official ties to these things. No one could admit it. But yet he gave us the data years ago, and he's been giving us the data over the years and everything he's saying. I'm seeing the Hoagland I know behind the surface, and that's the one I'm having faith in.
All right, Klaatu, I appreciate the call, checking in from Fountain, Colorado. Following the River with the Rolling Stones. Richard Syrett sitting in for George Noory. Coast to Coast continues with your calls right after this. And thank you for inviting me into your homes, your pickup trucks, your long-haul trucks, your earbuds. 1979, wow. London Calling. The Clash. This album was on every turntable at every house party that year I can remember ever attending. Train in Vain. For years I thought it was called Stand By Me, but it's Train in Vain by Joe Strummer and Company. Great album, London Calling. I believe that was their third album. If you get on up to the coasttocoastam.com website, our webmaster this evening, Sean Ladouceur, has posted a number of great stories, as always, and Richard C. Hoagland alluded to this in the last hour. There could be Earth-like planets orbiting a star in our nearest solar system, basically the next galaxy over. Alpha Centauri, scientists used Hubble data to find a dip in the light from a recently discovered planet, Alpha Centauri b, caused when it passes in front of the star. Evidence also points to the existence of another planet. They're calling that one Alpha Centauri bb. It's thought the two planets are too close to their star to support life. However, astronomers think they could be part of a planetary system which includes water-covered worlds like our own, with conditions conducive for life. You can read all about it. The story is published on the Daily Mail online version, and you can read more at coasttocoastam.com in the news section. Thank you to webmaster Sean Ladouceur for that. Let me just take a couple of minutes to tell you about the Coast Insider Club. Now, you're listening to this program live, most of you right now, but maybe you've got family, friends, colleagues. They're not a night owl. It's a struggle for them to stay up way into the wee hours. So you got to tell them for about 15 cents a day. That's all it takes. They can have this show waiting for them on their desktop or their iPhone or what have you the next day. 15 cents a day. And they get access. They can go back 5 years worth of programs in the audio archives. That's over 1,000 shows. Plus, they have access to the monthly chats with George and various guests, and it's real simple. All they have to do, you tell them this, they just have to go to coasttocoastam.com and sign up. Lickety-split, done. Back to more of Open Lines here on Coast to Coast AM right after this. We are back here on Coast to Coast AM. Richard Syrett sitting in for George Noory. Let's go back to the phones, and let's see here. We have on the wild card line, Robert is in Las Vegas. Greetings from the Silver State, Robert.
Yeah, hey, great show. You do a great job, and I appreciate that. I also like your buddy, John B. Wells. I don't know if he's ever going to come back on, but enjoy both of you guys. I wanted to add some info about the colloidal silver, and of course, silver hydrosol is the next improvement above that. It's a more bioavailable. George Noory has had guests over the past years that have highlighted the benefits that you talked about. And I know, let me just read this to you here, because I believe I heard on your station throughout the news that the government is now going to step in because they're worried about antibiotics becoming lesser and less effective. Now, here's research done by chief scientists at Boston University in June of 2013, and he found that adding small amounts of colloidal silver to standard antibiotics increased the antibiotics' ability to treat infections up to 1,000 times, rendering antibiotics effective against even resistant bugs and strains. And I don't know, maybe you can get, the doctor's name is Jim Collins, the chief scientist and co-author of the study from Boston University. Maybe you can get him on, because he has this published in a journal, and he's showing that this could be a solution to antibiotic resistance, including MRSA and other types of strains. And apparently the research is showing that the silver and, of course, the silver hydrosol destroy virus as well. Now, I don't know what prescription can destroy a virus, so I think that silver is amazing. I know in the burn centers that they do use silver gauze. Gauze is coated with silver, and the reason why, from my reading, that you had no problem was because the silver prevented an infection, and your skin was able to heal faster. And of course, if you look back at old books, they used to put silver dollars in milk, and they didn't know why it worked. They just know that milk lasted longer. And of course, they have a lot of literature saying that a lot of the royalty, the reason they use pure silver is because they saw a benefit to it. And so maybe you can get this Dr. Collins on your show. You always have some good guests, and let him talk about the research. Do you have your own machine and make it yourself? Because I did an internet search, and it seems you can get really high effective silver that's 99.99% nanoparticle for a machine for under about $800.
I don't make my own, and given my track record, around things electrical, I don't think I'd want to try. But I did find a gentleman down in southern Ontario, Niagara Falls, who's been on my radio show up here in Canada, who makes his own, and he sells it. It's perfectly legal. It's approved, although you cannot make claims about what it can do. And he has he maintains that most people are making it incorrectly. Because they're using distilled water, they're not using a high enough electrical charge in the water, I guess, to get the right mixture. So he makes it a little bit differently. And anyway, I used it on my scalded hands, and all I can say anecdotally, for what it's worth, is no pain.
I read in Germany that they use distilled water. I think that's the standard. And in at least in Germany, I read online there's a couple places that will do an intravenous colloidal silver because it's pharmaceutical grade water they're using. So I don't. Of course, you're right. Let an expert do it, but they do an IV drip using 14 parts per million of silver hydrosol, and they also use, in addition to that, when I read on the website, they use oxygenation therapies using ozone, and ozone water has a half-life of something like 10 minutes, meaning it'll dissipate, and they're combining that with high dose of vitamin C. And they're getting pretty good results up in Germany, but these places aren't cheap. And there's a couple rock stars I read about that treat their illnesses with that. It would be nice if we could have insurance that would cover, these integrative approaches here. And
Think about what you're saying. Think about what you're saying, Robert.
And you wouldn't have to leave the country. But I mean, if it worked for your burns, I wonder if any other callers can call in. If somebody works at a burn center, I mean, if an ER doctor knows about this, it worked for you. Why would it? And it worked for thousands of years. It'd be nice if they could implement it for everybody. I will say that Dr. Oz and his father-in-law do use this. He had an episode where his father-in-law had silver, and he recommended it to the audience.
Well, it's been around for 1,000 years or more, I've heard about it for many years, but now I have firsthand knowledge with colloidal silver, and again, very effective for me personally, only me as far as I know, but no pain, and I should have been in excruciating pain with the burns that I sustained to my hand just three weeks ago. Robert, thanks so much for checking in from the Silver State. Coincidence? Methinks not. Paul is in Eaton, Ohio on the wild card line. Paul, good morning and welcome to Coast.
Hey, Richard. How you doing?
I'm all right, thanks.
Yeah, I had a couple things. One thing I was wondering, do you suppose someone threw Forrestal out of that hospital window to keep him from disclosing what he knew?
Well, that's the legend, isn't it? That he was given a dose of LSD and tossed from the window because he was ready to disclose.
Yeah, it sure sounds fishy, don't it?
Yeah, like that. Well, there's a long list of those types of deaths. I suppose you can connect the dots to UFO disclosure. But who's to say? That was a long time ago.
Yeah,
the trail is pretty well dried up.
The other thing I was thinking about listening to you is I agree with you. These beings and these vehicles that people keep seeing are interdimensional. You can tell that by their flight characteristics.
Well, that certainly goes a long way to explaining a lot of things. For example, how they first of all, why they seem to flit in and out of our reality. You see them and then you don't, and only certain people see them. And then secondly, how else to explain how they are able to conquer such vast distances.
Yeah.
If they're traveling interdimensionally, that solves that problem.
Yeah.
I know that's not a popular view in the UFO community, but that's mine, and I stand by it.
Well, that's my opinion too. I'm a Christian myself. Glad to meet you, brother.
Likewise. Keep your head down.
I think, this is just me, but I think these so-called aliens that people are seeing, in my opinion, are demons posing as aliens.
Or perhaps both. If they're from the angelic realm, they could be demons and they could be angels. We have supposed footage of these craft seemingly battling one another. So maybe we're talking about both here, angels and demons. Why is that so beyond the realm of possibility? We can talk about intelligent life that exists light years from our planet, and yet for some people, they can't wrap their heads around the idea of interdimensional beings or, a spirit realm. Why is that so beyond, the realm of possibility?
I don't know, but there's so much beyond our understanding that I hope they do disclose what they know. But I can't, for the life of me, I can't see them doing it.
Not holding my breath either, Paul. Thanks for the call. Let's see here. Is Sarah in Pocatello, Idaho, still with us? No. All right. Let's try international line. Mike is in Montreal. Mike also wants to talk about colloidal silver. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good evening, Richard. I am excellent. To sort of confirm what your earlier caller was saying about colloidal silver, I'm an electronics engineer. I'm also a practicing naturopathic doctor. And your previous caller was absolutely right. Colloidal silver was widely used in the United States until the FDA came along. And in fact, it was used around the world. It's been used for a very long time, and it's been considered useful for something like 670 different diseases, and particularly infections, things like that.
Can you explain how it's made? Can you walk me through it? How is it made? Can you walk me through how it's made?
It's actually a very simple process. You don't need an $800 machine to do this. To get 14 parts per million, you may have to go to an expensive machine like an $800 machine. But you can make very pure, completely useful colloidal silver at 9 parts per million using a 9-volt battery and two pieces of pure silver. You take 2 silver wands, shall we say, 2 fine pieces of silver, put them into a glass of distilled water.
And it's a steel at $16 an ounce. I should point out it's a steel at $16 an ounce. So get it while you can.
Well, silver is a very good deal at that price. But anyway, it costs very little to make, very, very little to make. You can make it for about $1 an ounce. And 9 parts per million is almost as useful as 14 parts per million, and you can do it for pennies, literally pennies. Now, it has been used intravenously for everything, including cancer.
Is silver naturally occurring in the body? Is silver naturally occurring in the body?
Yes, it is. We do have silver in our body, but not at a very high concentration, which is why it's so important to boost the concentration of the silver in your body if you want to try and cure a disease or an infection of that type. It's, as you found, it's incredibly useful for burns. But even an everyday thing like the flu or a common cold, my little granddaughter, I've treated with her colds with silver, and when she gets a sniffle, she'll call me and go, "Pa, Mickey, can you give me a glass of silver? I'm getting a cold again."
And how? Why does it work?
It does.
Why does it work? I've been told that it has something to do with the negative and positive charges of the cells in our body, and then the charge of the actual, I suppose, silver electrons.
You're absolutely right. That's what it does. It basically, to put it in easy to understand terms, it's basically shorting out the diseases like viruses and bacterium that are not naturally occurring in our body that our body's trying to fight with our immune system. In many cases, our immune system is not very good at it, and antibiotics, as he was saying, are not very effective anymore. They're becoming very, very resistant to most diseases are becoming very resistant to our common antibiotics, whereas colloidal silver can be used effectively on a broad spectrum of things, and it's incredibly useful. Actually, you met a friend of mine when you were did a show in Toronto with George Norrie. A friend of mine named Erica Shark gave you a book on the science of actuality from Mel Winfield. This something we were testing this in late 70s, early 80s. We also did a lot of work on what's called the Hutchison effect now, which
good old John Hutchison. Yes, I know John.
John Hutchison. You know John. Well,
yes, I've spoken to John a number of times.
John in court for donkey's years.
Well, we won't get into that. We won't get into the court case.
No, we won't get into that. So we'll go back to the colloidal silver. Yeah, it's understood and has been considered useful. It's used widely around the world. Sweden and Finland, it's available as a treatment. As he was saying, IV treatment with colloidal silver and vitamin C as an adjunct has been used for some very serious diseases very widely. It's extremely effective. It is basically an electrical phenomenon. The silver ions, you can also more effectively but very expensively, you can treat yourself with colloidal gold.
Yes, I've heard about that. They're calling it nano water.
Much more effective conductor than silver.
Right.
It works considerably better.
Well, and as you say, you can make it for pennies a glass, and that may have. Yeah, and that may have something to do with why you're not going to see a peer-reviewed article in a journal filled with ads for the pharmaceuticals anytime soon.
Well,
listen,
that's precisely why. Do you think anybody would spend the thousands of dollars on conventional drugs if they knew that they could treat it with colloidal silver?
Bingo. Michael, appreciate the call. Thanks for checking in from Montreal. Tom Waits, Time. Coast to Coast AM, Richard Serrett, sitting in for George Norrie. Stay with us. Randy Newman, with a little help from Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits. It's money that matters. Randy Newman, I think, one of the great composers of the latter half of the 20th century. And if memory serves, his father was quite a composer as well. We are floating the hashtag Richard C2C. Hashtag Richard and C as in coast, the number 2, and C as in coast. Richard C2C. From DML Solstice. Sounds to me like you need to be more safety conscious and attentive when melting candle wax on a stove, dude. Duh. True enough, a rookie mistake. I was mentioning earlier how I burned my hand. My wife burned her hand. We had an unattended pot of candle wax on the stove, caused a small fire in our condo, and it was a close call. But if it weren't for the colloidal silver, I tell you, we would have both been in a great deal of excruciating pain these last 3 weeks. Anyway, I'm attributing it to the colloidal silver, which we used liberally on our burns. And then let's see, we have Daniel Strickland. Talking about something called Steraplex, the best silver-based hospital sterilization. It's the only one backed by the CDC to kill certain bacteria and viruses, C. difficile. And then he also mentions this company in Utah that is producing this silver-based industrial cleaner, and it's backed again by the CDC as the best to use in hospitals. Again, a silver-based product. Talking about colloidal silver. We will get back to your phone calls about colloidal silver and just about anything else here on the open lines portion. A half hour to go before we dim the lights and say goodnight, good morning on Coast to Coast AM. Ray is in Sandy, Utah. Good morning, Ray. Welcome to Coast to Coast.
Good morning, Richard.
How are you?
Are you there?
I am, listening attentively. Awesome. What have you got for us?
All right. Well, I love this show. It's so versatile. I was originally calling in about an hour ago to comment on a Bible verse that a gentleman said about Psalms 93, verse 1.
The earth is fixed.
What was that?
Yes, I believe the passage says the earth is fixed.
Yeah, exactly. It says the earth cannot be moved. You can translate that any way you want. But he was saying that the Earth is fixed. I translated the Earth cannot be moved because it's a planet, whatever. But you were saying that it can be moved. But I want to also get into the colloidal silver, which is kind of interesting because I just got home from a tattoo convention in Salt Lake City, Utah, and they were actually giving out free samples of this colloidal silver ointment that you could put on your tattoo after you got it, and it heals wonderfully.
Interesting. Okay, that's an interesting application.
Yeah, right. They were giving out free samples of it. Another thing I just want to commend you on, also kind of letting people know about your faith. Also, and I'm Christian as well. But and that's kind of a daring thing to do nowadays. But I mean, the whole thing with God and extraterrestrials, I believe, is I mean, I think that God has created, if you want to call it God, has created a whole number of species, has created a whole number of beings out there to his or her will. And
I agree. I mean, one of the reasons that we're told that we have this lid, this the suppression of the truth regarding UFOs and ETs is that if it were disclosed, it would destroy all organized religion. It wouldn't make a tinker's damn a difference for me in terms of my faith. It doesn't change anything. I may have to rethink certain things in terms of the biblical narrative, perhaps, because I'm not sure how UFOs and ETs fit into the biblical narrative. But in the end, it doesn't change, my belief in God.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole thing with UFOs and the ETs and the biblical narrative is it's a narrative. It's something that people perceived or that they believed that they saw, thousands of years ago. It's based on perception. It's based on what these human beings on this planet that, earlier in the show, we were talking about with the fall of man, with the supposed nuclear wars on Mars, not necessarily nuclear wars, but the nuclear destruction, whatever kind of words you want to put it in, the nuclear destruction of the planets, whatever. In the Bible, it says the fall of man. So you can describe that any way you want. What is the fall of man? It could be a nuclear war. It could be angels descending from heaven to hell. It's all based on perception. So, but I'm afraid the Bible. Oh my goodness, the Bible is a beautiful book. I believe it is the most. The Bible is the most informed book in the world. It has so much knowledge in it. It is so beautiful. It's so versatile. Along with any religion in the world, it's a beautiful thing because all it does is all the religions of this world promote love. They promote brotherly love. They say love your name. All of them. They all do it. I don't care what people say about Muslims, this and that. They all promote brotherly love, and that's what this whole world is based on. The whole meaning of life is based on love and energy, because energy cannot be destroyed; it's just replaced. And love is energy, and that's kind of the main reason why I called in tonight. Is because I love everyone on this planet. Everyone is a beautiful human being. Everyone is wonderful in their own way. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do. There is something beautiful about you, and don't ever forget that. So,
Ray, just keep those positive vibes coming because it does make a difference. I believe that. All right, thank you for the call. Thanks for checking in from Sandy, Utah. Let's go to the wild card line again. Boy, we're getting a lot of calls on the wild card lines tonight. Sean is checking in from the Virgin Islands. Hey, Sean, good morning. How are you?
Hello, good morning.
How are things in the Virgin Islands?
Yes, sir. I was calling regarding the colloidal silver.
All right, what can you tell me?
Oh, Okay. Well, you told me about your burns and how you used it topically, but at one point I had a staph infection, or actually the doctor said it might have been staph and strep, and I went to the local health food store, and basically I drank it, and that kept me out of the hospital.
Just knocked that infection right out, did it?
No, it didn't knock it right out, but it kept me out of the hospital. And I was told this from a gentleman named Richard in Montana. He told me that colloidal silver has been around since the Roman Empire, and it was in their water, and basically it helps boost your immunity system, and as your previous callers said, it fights bacteria, viruses, everything.
Sean, I appreciate that. Thanks for checking in. To the wild card line yet again, and Anthony's in Fort Lauderdale. Anthony, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Good morning, Richard. Also a Christian, accepted Christ in the tomb in Israel when I was in the Navy when Jimmy Carter was the president. My whole life changed from that day on. I'm able to see what goes on with our governments, why things are happening. All this was told to us while we went through Christian-type gatherings on the ship as we did our mission. When I was in Egypt, if you remember when Obama went over to Egypt and he went into the tomb behind the Sphinx, it's a very sacred area. I went into the same one in 1977, and the tourist that was telling us showed a picture that looked like Obama on the where it was really dark in there, but you could see what Obama looks like today. And when Obama went over during his election, he said, "Look, there's me." The tourist said, "This man's going to come back in reincarnation, and he will have a lot of power on the earth before Christ comes back to earth." This is what's told to us in 1977.
So this is Barack Obama is a reincarnation of a pharaoh. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's correct. And he will have the power. What you see him do, it's almost like he's Teflon. Everything he does, anybody goes against him, all of a sudden they lose their power somehow. They have no breath against him. But that's only going to last so long, because we're witnessing him and Benjamin Netanyahu bumping heads. And we're seeing the battle. There is a battle going on right now. You're seeing the gathering with the German chancellor, all of them coming together. They show that. That's witnessing to the Christians. The religion war is ready to begin. But do not fear, because I'm going to come back and destroy these kings for destroying my people. I know that's really deep for some, but that I can see what's going on in the earth. I'm not even scared what goes on.
Gabriel, come blow your horn.
I witness more and more every day.
Well, we had Carl Gallups on the program a couple of weeks ago, in his new book Final Warning, talking about the seven trumpets of Revelation, and I've sort of lost track. Where are we on trumpet number 5 or 6? I think we're heading into trumpet 6, and my gosh, we only get 7, so it's later than we think, perhaps. Let's go. Thank you for the call, Anthony. Let's go east of the Rockies this time, and Ron is trucking in Indiana. Ron, welcome.
How's it going, man? I'd like
all
to
right,
talk
my
about
friend.
the moon
How are you?
tonight.
How are the roads?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
How are the roads, Byron?
The roads are doing good tonight.
Good. 2 hands on the wheel, my friend.
It's a mellow night.
Good.
But there's 2 things that really fascinate me about the moon. And one thing, that in our solar system, all these planets are rotating. And in the theory goes that a Mars-like planet hit the Earth, and our moon formed from that. But yet that moon doesn't rotate, spin at all.
No, it does not.
I wonder why that would be when all the other planets are spinning. I don't know. And the other thing is NASA sends a nuclear weapon up there and shoots the moon. Have you heard of anything about that?
They want to send a nuclear missile up to the moon?
No, they have.
Oh, they have?
Have you heard of that?
No, not offhand. For what purpose?
Well, it's on YouTube. I heard about it on the internet, and I researched it, and there is a whole lot of stuff saying that NASA has went up there and struck the moon with a nuclear weapon for whatever reason in search of water or I don't know what.
All
and
right, we'll have to look into that.
If there is life looking at us like extraterrestrials, watching us, what must they think of us? The bombs that we send off on each other, and now we're sending one to the moon.
Well, here's
That's
something
I to Google.
Byron, here's something I just found online. It's called Project A119, which is also known as a study of lunar research flights. It was a top-secret plan developed in 1958 by the United States Air Force, and the aim of the project was to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon, which would help in answering some of the mysteries in planetary astronomy and astrology. And had the explosive device not entered into a lunar crater, the flash of explosive light would have been faintly visible to people on Earth with their naked eye, a show of force resulting in a possible boosting of domestic morale and the capabilities of the United States, a boost that was needed after the Soviet Union took an early lead in the space race and who were also working on a similar project. And that's called Project A119.
Saying that they did fire one at it and it hit a crater on the moon.
That's what I'm getting.
Right?
Yeah, apparently. I'll have to look into that more deeply. That's fascinating. Appreciate that, Byron. Safe driving in Indiana. We've got time for a few more here if we hurry. West of the Rockies, Scott is in Weed, California. Scott, good morning. How are you?
Oh, being entertained by your whole stuff. Usually I'm listening to some lame music that I don't really enjoy. But,
well, welcome. Glad you found us.
Hey, I was just calling with a question. I recently had a friend that was convinced he was developing a psychic connection with his dog.
Okay.
And
Tell me more.
At that time, I had been hearing a lot of stories about directed energy weapons, and I was looking into the zombie guns and some of the super-duper ray guns that can induce psychosis and things like that. And I can't really find any credible information on them. I mean, there are some of them that can blow up your eyeballs and destroy you and things like that, but I was thinking that kind of coincidentally he was developing a psychic connection with his dog, and he was living under a federal communications tower. I was just wondering, do you know any of the spectrum of what these weapons are capable of?
I don't. I mean, I've had people, or I've interviewed people like Dr. John Hall, an anesthesiologist from San Antonio, who talks about some of these directed energy type weapons. Some of them he contends are satellite based. And then we're getting into the realm of, electronic harassment, mind control. This is just a huge gray area for me. I mean, there are, by some accounts, up to 300,000 people in the United States who may be targeted by some sort of directed energy weapon. And I mean, are they using satellites? I don't know. To me, a lot of the technology exists. Just you take the door off a microwave oven, and you can turn that into some sort of a directed energy. Through an apartment wall, you can make someone in the next apartment, the next unit, sick if you're constantly bombarding them with these microwaves. And the other thing is we are living in an
transmit electricity through the atmosphere to Europe, and now they can do it with microwaves bouncing it off of satellites. I mean, they do have a lot of capabilities. But
well, the thing is also, how do you separate an intentional targeting of an individual with just electrical sensitivity, because we are all swimming in electronic smog with cell towers and being constantly bombarded and blasted with microwaves and so forth. I mean, certain people, I believe, are very sensitive to that. So, how can you differentiate between someone who's being targeted and someone who's just sensitive to, different levels of electromagnetivity? Electromagnetic. That's a hard word to say at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, that's the difficulty I have. Not that I disbelieve that people are being targeted. I certainly believe that there are individuals that are being targeted for whatever reason.
I'm a firm believer, and I don't know. But it was kind of strange that I just thought it coincidental the guy was living under a communications tower and developing a psychic connection with his dog. But I wasn't
That
quite
is
convinced.
that is a strange one. That is a strange one.
Thanks a lot for talking to me. I was hoping that you might know more than I do.
Sorry, Scott. We're all sort of scrambling around in the dark on that one, I'm afraid. First time caller. Do we have time for Logan in Washington? Logan, welcome. Just a quick 30 seconds to say hi if you can.
How's it going?
Very well, sir. How are you?
Good. I was actually wondering about if you knew anything about the Mel's Hole here in Ellensburg, Washington.
I heard a number of programs on this very program years and years ago about
like
Mel's Hole, and
1991 or so.
Right, yeah, that's a legendary story.
Yeah. I just didn't know if you had any information on that. I know there were some tests done, I guess.
I don't have an update, unfortunately. I wish I did. You know, the best thing, probably go to coasttocoastam.com and search the archives. You may even be able to pull that show up. All right, we are out of time. My thanks to Lisa Lyon, George Norrie, George Knapp, Tom Danheiser, Dan Galante, Sean Ladouceur, and everyone here in Toronto for making the show happen, as well as Gord Harris, Scott Guest, all of you for listening. My name is Richard Syrett. Thanks for your voices, your beautiful voices.